Hello everyone and welcome to the EVN Disrupt podcast. My name is Nejdet Zaturyan. I'm the editor of the creative tech section here at EVN Report. Our guest this week was Mariam Torosyan, the CEO and founder of SafeU. She joined us to discuss her platform's mission to empower women by providing tools to report cases of sexual and domestic violence, seek help, and to create a virtual safe space for women. We delved into the progress SafeU has made since its inception 3 years ago, including the thoughtful consideration of various cultural factors that guide their implementation strategies. Mariam also shared with us her insights on the current state of women in the tech industry in Armenia, highlighting the efforts and challenges in ensuring that women not only have access to opportunities, but are also encouraged to found companies and assume leadership roles in the industry. Thank you for listening. Mariam, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for inviting.
Let's start with a little bit of your background. I'm curious what you studied, how you got into the world of impact entrepreneurship.
I'm a lawyer by trade. I did also my master's degree in constitutional law, human rights law, and then my master thesis was also in intersection with social anthropology, and I got very much interested in different cultures and how different cultures interact with different legal systems. And then I did my PhD research in social anthropology and law. That brought me to more like social anthropology. And then I got interested also in public health, and I did different courses in public health and started teaching public health law. So this is my background. It has like this three main pieces,
Right.
let's say.
The master's one, when you said it intersected with how cultures, or I guess how laws need to fit the cultures that they should be applied to, is really interesting. Can you tell us
That's
a
like
little more about that?
understanding what is the context, what are the cultures, traditions, like social structures, and how the law can be efficient or non-efficient if we, for example, bring it from somewhere else, for example, from European Union to Armenia or from other countries, and how this can change the culture in a country in a good way or in a bad way. And in some cases, it's even impossible to implant something without preliminary work with society. And we see in many cases this is actually happening in different countries, and that's why also there are a lot of contradictions between cultures, legal systems, and let's say even different civilizations. And that was very interesting for me because law is a very dogmatic field. It has a lot of universalism in it, but then you have to add some relativism because cultures and development of different societies is a very relativistic movement, let's say. And that was very interesting for me, how we combine universalism with relativism. And
Right. It's like a solution that works in Portugal doesn't necessarily mean it'll work in the United States or in Armenia. Yeah. Do you think, this is probably a very hard question, but do you think in the Armenian context that view is given enough weight? Do you think our government considers the relativism of how laws can be applied enough? Or do they look at what works elsewhere and try to stick it here?
Well, actually, as a student, some 10 years ago, that was my main concern about how we want to change things in our country and how we are just doing it in a formal, textual way, not in a way understanding what needs to be changed or what needs to communicate it with society so that we can bring this change and make sure that it will have the desired results. And I was... as a lawyer, as also from the point of view of constitutional culture, I was looking at all these processes with understanding that, okay, we have constitution, but we don't have constitutional culture, and how this all leads to a lot of misconceptions in a society, and how the change that we want to see is not happening. That's why we need some preliminary work that, in my opinion, even if it's done, it's not done in an efficient, complete way.
It's a really interesting way to characterize it. We have a constitution, but we don't have a constitutional culture. So it almost voids the constitution of much meaning, unfortunately. Let's get to the founding of SafeU. Tell us the story of how and why you decided to start your venture.
So I was invited to lead a research with the World Bank Group, Enterprise Incubator Foundation, and Sexual Violence Research Initiative. It was a global research and understanding if there are any innovations tackling gender-based violence in the world. And when I started doing this research, I was pregnant, and I told my partner's colleagues that, well, the research will not last long because,
Right.
we'll go to maternity leave, but which never happened actually. And during my research, I understood that there's a huge problem, and gender-based violence is a human rights problem, it's a public health problem, it is a social cultural problem, and all my background actually was around this issue, and I was passionate about startups. I was even running a boutique accelerator at the time with my husband in Armenia, and then I realized that no, this is not going, can't be just remain as a research, because there is a real need for an innovation technology that can tackle this issue. And one event in my life changed also the way I was looking at this, because I was about to, like, it was 1 month left until I would have my baby, and at the family gathering an elderly lady asked me, "Oh, you look beautiful, and this is your first child, and it should be a boy." And then I said, "No, I'm waiting for a daughter." I smiled to her, but then she said, and then she approached me and said, "Don't worry, the next one will be a boy." And then my question to me was, why an elderly woman tells another woman that being a woman, which is not even born yet, is something undervalued or not important? And the answer to this question is a whole dissertation. It's intergenerational. It's a lot of stereotypes, a lot of like her life, her background, like all of these things. And then I said, no, I'm going to work and make sure that I'll create something that will make this world a better place for my daughter that is going to be born. And that's how my journey started.
Yeah. I found out something recently that just absolutely blew my mind. As someone who, I wasn't born and raised in Armenia, but a friend who recently gave birth in Armenia, the medical staff at the hospital that they would go to for checkups and stuff while they were pregnant often lies to them about the gender of their child, so that they won't abort the child if they know it's a girl. And I guess it's something that when I speak to locals, a lot of people know that is something that happens. But as someone coming from the outside, it was really staggering that the problem is that severe that the medical staff feel the need to lie to their patients to avoid them from doing sex-based abortions. So you had these experiences, and you were already both in the public health space through your education, and you were in the startup world, and you came to the idea of founding SafeU. Tell us the first iteration of the product.
So in the beginning, I was mainly focused, of course, on safety, because women's safety is an urgent priority, because 141 women are killed per day by their intimate partners or member of their family just because they are women.
Is that in Armenia, that statistic, or worldwide?
No, it's a worldwide. Yes, daily. During a year, it's 50,000 women, and 600,000 women are physically or sexually abused. And it is an urgent priority to make sure that there are some safety measures in place, and that was the main focus. That's why actually the product is called SafeU. But of course, you can't provide safety if you don't create also kind of community or support systems around women, because there's always a question of trust. Will they trust this product, this solution to apply when they need it? And that's why we also created this community space with forums. In the beginning, it was a very basic app with some safety functions, a network place to just see what are the other organizations, support services that can help them, and have, again, basic chats where they can engage with other women and professionals. Well, now it's way more developed because we have more than 83 releases of the app. But let's say the prototype was the main focus on safety, and actually we launched the product during pandemic, during lockdown. That's where actually I launched the company, and we launched the app in Armenia, and 1 month later we launched it in Georgia, because the need was even higher. During lockdown we saw a tremendous increase of domestic violence cases, and that's when we actually saw also the need for this kind of product.
Tell us a little bit about how the product is actually used. Because I remember in the very early days when I first heard about it, it was, correct me if I'm wrong, but for instance, women like walking home late at night or something would be able to find someone that was also walking the same route perhaps and go home together.
This is more if a woman needs help, like if she's in danger, then she can use her help button. So when she downloads the app and while she's using the app, she can choose and change. Like she can choose up to 3 contacts from her contact list. These are family and friends, up to 3 contacts from available support services that are onboarded into SafeU. And they can also activate police. So it's in total 7 directions. And when she's in danger, she can just press the help button and all the 7 directions will be notified that she's in danger, either through SafeU platform that they are using, or also through SMS if they're not using, for example, personal contacts. They will know that she's in danger, and immediately audio recording will start in her phone to record the case, because in most of the cases of domestic violence and sexual violence, there is a lack of evidence that it really happened. Sometimes police arrives and they're just sitting normally having coffee, but before it was, and that's the way safety part works. For other parts is mainly the access to resources, access to a network section where there are all other organizations, not specifically providing services for gender-based violence cases, but different, for example, on positive parenting or other social services that are available under different categories. Those are NGOs, governmental agencies, initiatives, etc. And the third most engaging part of the solution is a forum section. These are topical rooms created by NGOs or professionals. And women engage in peer-to-peer discussions. They're discussing the topic anonymously. And professionals and NGOs, they provide consultations to them. Like it's kind of facilitated peer-to-peer, also kind of educational process where women, first of all, support each other by sharing their stories and knowing that no one is alone, and also getting some valuable insights from professionals and organizations, feeling that also they're supported by advice and consultations. And there is also a space for private consultations, which is only between women and professionals, again, or organizations. That's more or less like providing them consultation. It's awareness raising place for the app, and for organizations that are using our platform is mainly using this awareness raising tools, case management, monitoring of cases, data analytics, and also shared space for all these agencies and organizations to work together towards the same goal.
The case management is used by, for instance, like counselors, people like that, or from authorities as well?
By organizations and by counselors that, if they are service providers, then yes, this can be also used depending on the country and on the context. For example, at the moment, app is fully live in 3 countries. We're now expanding to 2 other countries, and in all countries it works in a different way. Again, understanding the context of the country, legislation, agencies involved, and what is the best way for them to function for the best benefit of user.
Right, and the culture that they're found in. Yes. Right. So in the event where a woman who uses the SafeU app feels they're in danger and they use the help button, is it automatically go to all 7 of those?
Yes, all 7
members?
directions, with her geolocation shared with a short message that she's in danger, and the message or notification goes through our system. So it goes through SafeU, because we are covering also the costs of SMS, because these women usually are also from vulnerable groups. So the app is free, but also all the other services that they use within the app are free or covered by us.
So if, for example, if my sister is using it, does that mean that I also have the SafeU app? Or
no, you don't need to have SafeU app, because it will be a big limitation. That's why we did it through a text message.
Tell us a little bit about what the usage of the app is like now in Armenia 3 years after launching.
How many users we have?
How many users you have, and for lack of a better word, like what trends there are and how people are using the app?
Well, in the beginning it was very difficult actually, because we had a lot of regional meetings with different groups of women, and because of the stigma that they don't want to be associated with domestic violence, even though they are survivors of domestic violence. And it took us a lot of time to understand what are the best ways to promote this product and to create trust, because in Armenia we have a huge crisis of trust towards any solution, any institution. And if you're launching something new, then of course they want to know who are behind this and why this is created and how this can be helpful and can it be helpful at all. For example, in Georgia, we had only one meeting. I mean, we went there 2 years after launching SafeU, but we saw that Georgian society is way more adaptive to this innovation. We had many cases where SafeU was helpful in severe domestic violence cases and cases of attempted murders, etc. So we had even lives that were saved thanks to SafeU in Georgia, while in Armenia we're still struggling on finding ways on how to promote. And even the influencers in Georgia, when they saw this product, they just by their initiative they took and they started promoting this. While in Armenia we had to convince influencers to talk about this, have decent contracts with them so that they are also interested in talking about this, which means that the social issue itself doesn't have that much awareness in Armenia first, and secondly we see the trust level and adaptiveness to technologies and innovation is higher, for example, in Georgia than in Armenia. That's why, for example, if in Georgia we have more than 25,000 users already, in Armenia we only have 7,000 users, which is... but also I have to say that all the users that we have in Armenia, they are targeted users, which means they're all women that experience some form of mostly domestic violence or other types of psychological violence. But in Armenia, we, of course, need to enhance our promotion. But sometimes also when we promote this product, there is always this also issue that this is not an urgent priority in Armenian society. We have security issues. Right. Why we should pay attention to this. So it's very difficult to...
You're almost competing against other issues in space. When you said that they're in Armenia, your users are more targeted, do you mean that they begin using SafeU only after already experiencing some form of domestic or sexual violence?
Most of these users, they either test the product, which means that they experience violence, but they want to still test the trust, if they can trust the system. And also the things that are discussed in the forum section is not only about their well-being or self-care, something that we see in Georgian discussions. In Armenian discussions, we see severe cases of psychological violence, cases of a husband not only beating his wife but also kids. I mean, this is more cases where women understood that the need is so urgent that even if they don't trust, or it's kind of exit for them. And that's what we see through also our data analytics system, the main trends and tendencies within our Armenian users.
Right. Armenia and Georgia in many ways are similar countries and societies, although I'm sure there are important differences. Do you have a sense of why Georgia, 30 years post the fall of the Soviet Union, has gotten to a place where they would adapt a solution like SafeU faster and easier than Armenia? Do you have a sense of what in their history over the last few decades made that?
Well, maybe it's because they started this social movements and revolution much earlier than we did, and their civil society organizations were also largely supported by also foreign different agencies and supporters. And yes, their civil society is vibrant, very active. They have women's movement in their country. Right. They do the protests when they need to. And I would say that every social issue have separate group of activists that are involved, that can make pressure on the government to change things. While in Armenia, maybe because of our main priority issue, which is a security, then we don't concentrate that much on different social issues that we have: women, children, elderly, healthcare. I mean, all of these things are not that prioritized because of the ongoing situation with the war.
So the number of advocates for a solution like SafeU in Georgia is just greater than in Armenia. But yeah, when you're launching SafeU in a new country, but even the countries you've already launched in, I'm assuming there needs to be government buy-in, right? Because if you're automatically alerting authorities and other bodies that are controlled by the government, they need to agree to it first. So when you were having the conversations with the Armenian government to launch SafeU here, what was their reception like? What is it that they wanted to see, or what were their initial feedback?
Well, first of all, I have to say that we don't specifically need government to collaborate with us, because we understand that in the countries where the problem is even greater, then the government, they don't have agenda or willingness to tackle this issue. For us, even one organization can be enough to start working there, because we understand that technology is there where there are a lot of gaps, and the technology can close actually these gaps. For example, we are now launching in Zimbabwe with several organizations. The government is not going to collaborate because there is no collaboration right now. UN agencies are going to support the initiative too, but as it goes to police, it will go indirectly from the organizations, and they will also kind of control the case on their end, so follow up and see if police adequately treated the case or not. In Armenia case, actually our first supporter in Armenia was United Nations Population Fund, because they also have the mandate to tackle gender-based violence, and also thanks to them we started negotiations with police, and at the moment we are creating a SafeU extension for Armenian police, which is a great development. So it's more institutional integration from SafeU to police. We are collaborating with the Ministry of Social Affairs and Human Rights Defender Office, and I have to say that all these collaborations are very fruitful, and we can definitely see the readiness from the government to collaborate and adopt things that can, let's say, make the process of helping women more efficient. Of course, when we are working with government, we are very mindful of the fact that everything is happening in a slow pace, but at least the willingness is there, and the collaboration is there.
Can you expand a bit on what you mean by integrating with the police?
So at the moment, our alerts can go to police either as a ordinary phone call or through an email. But to integrate with them, we need some system integration to be able to send them more information. For example, for the geolocation of the user, which is crucial. We had cases where the alert was received by a different organization, but we had then to call police and explain all the coordinates of where the user is. And that was very difficult, and it was a case where a husband almost killed with a knife his wife. And if we were not efficient in explaining where the situation is happening and what is the situation, then it could be do you
have some sort of hotline or operators that are constantly on call to make calls like that, or
well,
as a part of your staff?
In Armenia, we understood that we also need not only to be a technology provider, innovation provider, as we are in other countries, but in Armenia we also need to have a kind of organization that will be service provider. So that's why we created the foundation to be able to do small projects through SafeU, even though SafeU works with Women's Support Center, which is the largest service provider in Armenia. And yes, it goes to them, and then they decide if they should refer this case to police or not through legislation, and if there is a consent from the user. So it again depends. Sometimes it can come to SafeU because we also have lawyers, psychologists, and so we can also provide more or less the same services as other NGOs can do. And for us, it is also a way to learn how we can improve the technology to make sure that the user journey is more friendly and efficient.
Right. So today you guys are in Armenia, Georgia, and Iraq, I believe, and you said you're expanding to 2 more countries, Zimbabwe and can you tell us
the biggest part of implementation in Zimbabwe is completed. We just need to open the app for users. I mean, the stakeholders are engaged. They know how to use the platform, and this is the biggest part of, let's say, implementation. And then it goes, we open the app in their language, which is already translated, and then they start promoting and doing projects like pushing content through the app. And in Rwanda, we are working with multiple agencies. So it's first of all government. The willingness came from government to work on this project. It's government.
They reached out to you?
Two major NGOs in the field and UNFPA. So it's going to be a bigger project, multi-stakeholder project with long-term plans to, like, we will pilot for 3 months, 3 to 6 months, and then we will transition to scale and have the whole, like, Rwanda as a country within the project. So we are still understanding what is the best way, which agency is going to play what kind of role. And this is how it's happening. In every country we go, we first understand what is the landscape, from whom the interest comes. If it's from UN agency, then it's a different procedure. If it's from a group or consortium of NGOs, it's different. And with the government, we know that it's going to take longer, but we have to plan for at least 2-3 years of implementation and all the necessary steps to achieve it.
That's the average time it takes to launch the platform in a country? 2 to 3
No,
years?
usually to launch it takes from 1 to 4 months. But with the government, it can take up to 1 year. Even because of their fiscal year, bureaucracy, understanding all this, where the data is going to be deployed, what are the legislation limitations, etc.
Right. Earlier you spoke about how domestic violence is a public health issue. And I think to maybe the average person, it's hard for them to understand why it's valuable to look at not just domestic violence, but a whole variety of issues that often don't fit what the average person has in their head of what public health is. Why is it advantageous or productive to approach an issue like domestic violence through the lens of public health? And what does that even mean to look at it through public health?
The problem is that 1 in 3 women experience some form of physical or sexual violence. So their physical or sexual health and their mental health is damaged. And because of this also, if we go to also economic, because there's a public health impact, but also there's an economic impact, we lose from 2 to 3.7% of our GDPs because of this issue. And actually in Armenia this is very visible because women don't participate in economy. And in many cases, it's a form of gender-based violence that didn't allow them to participate in economy.
Right.
But when we look at, unfortunately in Armenia, there is no data how much expenditure from our public health budgets go to treat women with mental or physical sexual reproductive health problems that are coming actually from the violence. And in most of the cases, all the stress associated with this, or the problem that they are unable to have kids, also because of sex-selective abortions. In most of the cases, like sex-selective abortion is happening when it's a first pregnancy, and they would they would make the woman who doesn't want to do abortion because she needs to have a boy. And then why it is a public health issue, because it first of all it affects women's health, and indirectly, if it affects women's health, then it indirectly affects our economy.
Right.
And if there is no economy, then how we're going to develop this country? That's
Right.
a whole circle of things. That's why we always say, if we can find and establish peace in a family between 2 people, then we will have peace and prosperity for the entire society and country. But
Right.
this is not, unfortunately, happening. Our families are not healthy. Maybe from outside they look healthy, but from inside they are not. And coming back to sex-selective abortion issue, from the data that UNFPA provides, up until 2050, we will not have 90,000 girls to be born because they would just be aborted.
It's a staggering number. We can dive into those topics for several more hours, but I want to be respectful of your time. Tell us the format of SafeU. Is it a for-profit venture or is it a non-profit?
Well, it's a social enterprise. It's a social impact tech startup. And of course, the main purpose why we're doing this, because we believe that technologies, the tremendous opportunities that technologies and innovations play in our lives can be and should be served for the humanity. And we believe that by empowering women, we are also contributing to healthier societies, communities, and families, and to peace eventually. And because of this, our purpose, our mission is key to what we are doing. So it's a mission-driven efforts and actions, but to make sure that we can reach our goals to become a global solution to a global issue, we need to make sure that we have a sustainable model, because technology is something that requires a lot of investment, that requires a lot of talent to work on it. And that's why, yes, the model is through social entrepreneurship. We're achieving sustainable development goals, we're achieving gender equality, but the most important piece of it remains, of course, the social impact.
Does the revenue come from, like, for instance, the governments that you work with, or the...
Yeah, when we scale up the solution, every country pays for some implementation fee, again, depending on many factors, how we're doing this, and then monthly technical support fee.
Got it. You said something really interesting earlier. You said that you want there to be technological solutions for these various societal issues that we have. Oftentimes, when it's not a social enterprise or an impact enterprise, it's more of just like a technology looking for a problem. But with social enterprises, you almost have to start with the fundamental root, like societal issue that you're tackling. How do you evaluate whether something should have a technological solution or not, or if it's a technological solution is something that is not necessarily going to be helpful to that specific societal issue? How do you evaluate that?
Well, of course, there are a lot of issues that can't be solved through technology. And actually, even in our case, technology is there to enhance the efforts. It's not there to replace the existing mechanisms and structures. It's rather there to improve and enhance already existing capabilities that we have. And in our case, I would say we understood that there is a big issue of geographical and financial barriers, that women are unable to access already existing solutions, already existing knowledge, or existing community, because there are many women that are not even allowed, for example, in Armenia, to get out of their own apartment or own house, and they need some advice. They need to talk to other women. We had in our forum discussions some women that said that this is the first time that I'm talking to a gynecologist, which, like, her age, as she said, I think it was 35 or 40, which is abnormal in a normal life. But this is something which is happening, and we understood that in this case we need a remote solution, and we need to make sure that we can increase the possibility to receive help. Because in cases where a woman just calls someone and someone is not picking the phone, that's a problem. But of course, I recognize the fact that in some of social issues that doesn't require this, let's say, network solutions, remote solutions, then we need to come up with other kind of social innovation that will not necessarily require technology input there.
Right. It's not just a hammer looking for a nail, so to speak. Yeah. Another thing I meant to ask earlier was, you said that their recordings are done through the app. Women can record an incident that is happening, and I guess it's automatically sent or stored somehow that can be used later on. Have you already had instances where that has been used in some sort of case in courts? Or?
Yes, we have cases, and the most prominent case, again, comes from Georgia. It is a case of a woman and a 3-year-old daughter. They got attacked by ex-husband in a street where there was nobody around, and he wanted to kill them. And thanks to the app, first of all, like, police came and arrested the guy, and he didn't understood even what is happening because he didn't notice anything. Right. Because she pressed the button before he snatched the phone from her hands. And then the audio recording was used by a court as a pivotal piece of evidence, proving that it was a case of attempted murder. And that's why the criminal is now behind the bars, because he didn't manage to do harm to his daughter and ex-wife.
There's already precedent set of safety recordings being used in criminal trials. Let's pivot a little bit and talk a little bit about women in tech in Armenia. So this is a topic that in Armenia gets talked about quite a lot. There are some numbers that are shown that suggest that in some ways Armenia is ahead of many countries in terms of engaging more women in the tech sector. there's different ways you can look at those numbers. Give us a more honest and sober look at where we are in the world and what things you still think we need to overcome in order to ensure that all women in Armenia who want to be working in tech can do so and thrive in their careers.
So, of course, I would again start from the limitations that women are not even allowed sometimes to participate in economy. And again, like violence against women is another barrier why they can't, because there's always this concern that she will go to work and then she can be sexually harassed, etc. And there's another layer right now with the technology. It's a technology facilitated gender-based violence, and that is limiting actually women to participate in digital economy. That's a big another like global issue that we're facing, and there's very little awareness about this right now. But as we see digital economies developing and we see women facing a new layer of violence, which is technology facilitated violence, then it becomes another barrier, and which is actually present in Armenia, but we don't have enough knowledge on how to, again, find solutions for this. Well, I would say that if it comes to software engineers, product managers, project managers, we see a lot of women involved, and actually the numbers that we're very proud of, they seem to be real. But when it comes to founders, entrepreneurs, then actually I would say that there is a big issue. Every time when I was participating in any startup competition in Armenia, most of like judges, they're men. And for me, for example, it was very difficult to compete with other men in front of men with the issue that I am working on. Like it's very women specific, even though it's a society, but men, they usually don't have empathy to this subject, and it's difficult to create and then show that it's not non-profit job. It's a proper startup with a proper like business plan. And I would say that through my journey, from my perspective, I have seen a lot of or at different conferences which are not specifically like Femino, which is focused on women. If it's, for example, I don't know, Startup Summit or other things, mostly you see men as speakers and
right.
Men, and it's I don't think that it's very encouraging for younger girls and women. But we see that we have a lot of programs, initiative encouraging women. We see a lot of efforts and investment in that field too from different agencies, institutions, which is of course very good.
Yeah. I've been a part of, throughout my 4 years now in Armenia, I've heard along several conversations that, there's no barrier. Yeah, I'll use the words that they use. There's no barriers to women starting companies in Armenia. And oftentimes that's said by men who just look at it from a situation of, well, like if they came and pitched to us or, tried to do this thing or that thing, they could succeed just as the male founders in Armenia have. But obviously that doesn't look at sort of deeper cultural issues of whether or not women feel encouraged to start companies, or if there's sort of cultural and mental barriers that are enforced as to whether or not they can start a venture or not. Looking at it from your, I believe the word you used was like a relativist perspective of relative to Armenia's culture. What are some ways or initiatives you think can be implemented to break down those cultural barriers for more women to join the worlds of tech entrepreneurship? And have you seen anything that actually works here?
Well, actually, I would say that I have been participating in many different acceleration, incubation projects as a mentor. And the main problem that I see a lot of women motivated, trying to do things. Of course, there are a lot of problems finding other founders or knowledge or skills. But I see that in Armenia right now we have a lot of knowledge. We have different schools, boot camps, this, that. But when it comes to really start doing something, then there is a lack of funding, lack of investment. And when you look at the investments in Armenia, you would again see that most of it goes to male, like the startups that are funded by men. I don't know how this is happening actually, but I would say that we need probably some investment that will have some gender lens in it.
Like that a venture fund that invests specifically in women.
And we
founders.
also see actually more and more women in social entrepreneurship in Armenia. Most of social entrepreneurs in Armenia are women, so maybe it can be something more about sustainability, creating value for society and using tech for it or other things. But for sure, I think that the investment and banks, why not about loans too, they should be somehow focused on women.
In order to sort of bridge that gap until we get to a more equal place. Mariam, our last question that we ask all our guests is, where do you hope to see your organization, SafeU, in 5 years?
Well, in 5 years, to be present in... actually, I have an answer for 7 years. But
no problem, 7 years. In 7 years, where's SafeU?
Yes,
2030.
we want to be present in at least 60 countries. And to have 100 million users daily, help at least 60 women to not die from what they're dying from, just from the violence in a family. And that's more or less it. That's what, again, it's more a purpose. Of course, I can say what should be our valuation, how we're going to exit or adopt it by many big governments like United States. But the main focus, I will just keep this 100 million women that will benefit from this solution and live in peace, have lives where they can thrive, actually.
Right. Thank you so much for joining us today, Mariam. I learned a lot from the conversation, and there's so many topics that we've started talking about that we could speak about for many more hours. So I hope you'll join us again someday in the future to talk about that. Thank you, Mariam.